This weekend on the Gold Coast, representatives from New South Wales communities affected by coal seam gas drilling will get the opportunity to share information and work on strategies with their Queensland counterparts at the Lock the Gate Alliance annual general meeting. Community opposition to the coal seam gas industry is growing as fast as the industry is developing, with pressure on state governments to heavily regulate the sector. In New South Wales, the Greens have introduced legislation for a 12-month moratorium on coal seam gas development and a total ban on the industry in metropolitan areas. Shortly, a studio discussion between Greens MLC Jeremy Buckingham and the coal seam gas industry's Ross Dunn. But first, Sharon O'Neill reports on an industry with its foot on the gas.
Sydney. It's Australia's most expensive piece of real estate. But its wealth is not only what lies above the ground, but what lies beneath.
The industry certainly has big plans for Sydney. They would like to see dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of coal seam gas wells across the Sydney metro area.
Almost a kilometre below the surface of the Sydney Basin lies a rich source of coal seam gas. This gas, or methane, occurs naturally within coal deposits and is considered to be an environmentally friendly energy source. But it is the extraction process which has many worried.
What we're learning from the United States is that this is not an industry that can be integrated into residential areas. The pollution of water and the health impacts in terms of releasing hydrocarbons into the atmosphere are quite serious.
In 2008, a petroleum exploration licence was issued by the former Labor government for 2,386 square kilometres, extending from Kurnell to Gosford and west to Eastern Creek. St Peter's, in the densely populated inner west of Sydney, was chosen as the first drilling site.
We're completely outraged that there had basically been no notification of the local public, that this had been planned for over 2 years at the time, and nobody knew about it. No one knew a thing about it.
I've had no letter drops, I've had no one come to speak to me, no one.
The residents of the inner city quickly mobilised to express their anger at the state government's decision to open the door to drilling in a metropolitan area. But across the state, others were also complaining. Apart from the Sydney Basin, there are 3 other areas in New South Wales that are rich in coal seam gas. The Clarence Moreton Basin in the northeast of New South Wales, the Gunnedah Basin in the central part of the state, and the Gloucester Basin near Newcastle. In every one of these locations, well-organised community groups are making it clear they do not want coal seam gas wells in their areas.
This industry is just in its infancy at the moment. We're only talking a few thousand coal seam gas wells, but its plans for expansion are enormous.
Just after being elected, the O'Farrell government placed a 60-day moratorium on the granting of new coal seam gas and petroleum exploration licences in New South Wales. But the Greens have now introduced legislation into the Parliament which goes much further. They want a 12-month moratorium and a full inquiry into coal seam gas development. The bill would also prohibit coal seam gas drilling within the Sydney metropolitan area.
The really big problem is that if something goes wrong, if there's a failure, and we've seen 2 recent failures, both at Arrow in Queensland and with AGL out in Camden, is that depending on the size of the failure, remediation is impossible.
There's a lot of concern about it, but I think there's also a lot of disbelief about it as well. Certainly people I've spoken to are concerned. We've all got our no gas signs and banners up. But I think probably until something it actually starts, I think that's when people will realise that it is in fact a reality.